Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is December 5th, 2016, and we have a number of different topics that we want to get into. Some treachery by the U.S. House on two accounts. Of course, we want to talk about the war on alternative media by fake news websites like CNN and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. We also want to talk about the situation in the Middle East, in Syria, the White Helmets, the recent developments there. The battle for Aleppo is moving apace with the Syrian military gaining more and more territory as we go forward. And of course, some positive news, and also we want to talk about the way forward, of course, and the recount efforts and the points and plans that we want to have moving forward. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things tonight. The last few weeks, I haven't been doing the show up to date in terms of news. We've aired interviews that I've done with Voices Network and with Era of Wisdom. We've aired that for logistical reasons and because those were fairly decent interviews that we wanted to get aired and get that information out. But we are back this week to talk about various news issues. So if you want to keep up with the program, Truth on the Tracks is aired every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's re-aired throughout the week at ucy.tv. You can access the show's personal webpage at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. And on that page you'll find the archives, the links to my recent articles, and the YouTube videos of the show. If you're interested in my work, 3 websites you want to keep watching: activistpost.com, naturalblaze.com, eraofwisdom.org. And if you're interested in my work specifically, then I highly encourage you to go to brandonturbeville.com. That's the website where I repost all of the articles, all of the YouTube videos, all of the archives. All of that stuff is there. It's available for free. There's even the ability to get a free copy, digital copy of The Difference It Makes 36 Reasons Why Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President. Now, with the recount, this is not entirely a dated book, but we're going to take a look at that. Of course, Jill Stein, in an epic sellout, Jillery Stein, I guess is what we're going to call her now, Jillery, she has jumped on the bandwagon from criticizing Hillary Clinton as the worst option in the American political race to basically doing the dirty work of the Clintons. And so we wonder why Jill Stein, who's been so staunch in the past, is now abruptly taking a change of course all of a sudden. And perhaps this was one of those meetings with the Clintons. She didn't want to turn up suicided in a park somewhere. She didn't want to shoot herself in the back of the head with a shotgun. Maybe that's why she did it. Perhaps she was taken in the room and shown pictures of other Clinton victims. Or it could have been simply greed. It could have been that there was some type of backdoor deal between the Clintons and Stein. The Green Party now is in an uproar about Stein's sellout, and she is pretty much cashed in and burned all of her political capital, such as it may have been, 1%, in this effort. Any claims that it's an attempt to safeguard democracy, I'm sorry, I'm not falling for that. I don't think anybody's falling for that. Jillery has sold out. And people who are falling in line with this are unfortunately misled. Now there were occasions of vote fraud in various different states, pro-Hillary vote fraud. There's ballots being Donald Trump votes being turned into Hillary Clinton votes, and so forth. But this recount is really not just a waste of time on her part and a burning of her own political capital, but it's a method of a strategy of tension. This is the strategy of tension, after all. We have Trump initially saying that he might not accept the election results. Now, Hillary is not necessarily accepting the election results, and now we see the strategy of tension coming out. We see two sides, radicalized, who are not willing to necessarily give up. And there's the questions of power transfer, if this is going to happen. So you see the racial tensions, the political tensions, the religious tensions, the gender tensions. All these tensions are part of the strategy of tension to keep a nation at its own throat, while the national oligarchy clinches more and more control. Now, with that, in terms of the national oligarchy, this is not necessarily the oligarchy. This is their dupes. They're morons in the House, the U.S. House, and they've done a number of things recently. There is the H.R. 6393, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017. It was passed in the House of Representatives on November 30th. I do believe there were 390 votes for this piece of legislation. It's very concerning. Now, when we talk about fake news, this has been a big story. Fake news, of course, is an issue, right, that we have to deal with. There's the issue of so many fake news websites posting up stories, particularly on social media, that say Hillary Clinton shoots puppy because of election loss, or Donald Trump pours blood on face after debate. So something ridiculous. And these are the things that get shared around because those of you on Facebook read headlines and nothing else. I guess you're too busy with, God, what are you too busy with? If you're not reading any articles, obviously, you're just reading headlines. You're sharing this crap around. Things like Your Newswire, different satire websites. And again, people don't understand what satire means. If you're just making something up, that's not satire. That's making things up. That's fiction. Satire is intelligent. It is a mockery, essentially, of the status quo by using the absurd. And this, of course, is not using the absurd. It is just stupidity and fiction. But it's being shared because the people who are sharing it can't take the time to read the article or think for themselves or confirm it. And interestingly enough, most of the profiles that share this garbage are bots. So it's artificially being spread across these social media networks. This is why these fake websites go viral while serious articles don't, because these things are being shared by thousands and thousands, or millions, dare I say, of bots, social media bots. And this is what it's designed to do. So they're using these fake websites and saying that this is a danger, and they're lumping people like Activist Post, Natural Blaze, Arrow of Wisdom, myself, into a category of being fake news. Now, fake news, is it a problem? Of course it's a problem. But guess what else? This is the United States of America. We have the First Amendment. Free speech is never a problem that we have to regulate. So, yes, it may be a problem in terms of education, in terms of common sense, but if you don't have the right to make fake stories, then you don't have the right to speak freely. This is freedom of speech and expression. It's clear. Any abrogation of this is unconstitutional, it's immoral, it's unjust, and not only does it have to be fought, it has to be fought by any means necessary. And this is an egregious attack on free speech that we're seeing coming from the government and its corporate handlers. So, well, the corporate handlers are corporate partners in crime. This is why we see Google and AdSense now saying that they're going to take AdSense revenue away from fake news. And, of course, by fake news, they're not just we're talking about Your Newswire and stuff like that. They're talking about Activist Post, Natural Blaze, Arrow of Wisdom, Natural News, all these websites that often depend on things like Google AdSense for revenue. So what they're trying to do, obviously, is they've created a false flag scenario. They've created these fake news websites, promoted them, and then used the fake news websites as the battle cry to essentially defund the alternative media. This, of course, is the problem with being crippled by a dependence on big corporations like Google. They handed you a noose and you put it around your neck for them. Now they're starting to tighten it. This is the problem. But now the Google and Facebook are working together, the big corporations, because it's not technically a law. They can do this, right? There's no recourse, to my knowledge, that you could do with these private corporations. But they're so interwedded with government that they are essentially a wing of the intelligence agencies, right? The State Department, the intelligence agencies. So they've got this thing locked down, and that's what they're trying to clamp down even further. Now, I should say there's a website which existed about all of 5 minutes before it was being cited by the Washington Post, by Wall Street Journal, by the New York Times. It's called Prop or Not. Means propaganda or not. And it's accusing various websites of being Russian propaganda websites. Of course, Activist Post makes the list. Natural Blaze makes the list. Natural Health website is apparently Russian propaganda. So not wanting GMO foods or forced vaccination, or just simply wanting to be more aware of what herbs and vitamins can do for you is the scary reds. It's Putin, these damn herbs, and Putin and his herbs and his vitamins, and all the communists sneaking into the country trying to give us vitamin D and all of these B complex. So the really scary ones. This is the level of stupidity and depravity that these guys are using, and unfortunately it's being eaten up not by the average stupid Joe Plumber guy. No, it's being eaten up by your average college professor with 8 years of schooling and a few degrees behind his name, is reading this quaking in his boots because the Reds are coming to get him. Remember, about 5 years ago, you could ask these guys about Joe McCarthy, and Joe McCarthy was Beelzebub himself, and now they're screaming the same stupid garbage that Joe McCarthy was screaming. Except Joe McCarthy actually stumbled upon something real in the State Department. These guys couldn't stumble upon anything. They're too far gone. These are people who are now, I should just say, in America's universities. This is an example of why, unless you know exactly what you're going to do with your degree, you should stay far away from this stupidity, because these guys, you've got college professors out now teaching students that they shouldn't buy organic produce because it's contributing to global warming. And this is, I guess, organic produce is Russia's stealth way of destroying the world in this big conspiracy suicide mission, destroying the world with CO2 and causing global warming. Well played, Putin. Well played. This is just the ridiculous nature of the propaganda. And, of course, on Prop or Not, that website, of all the websites that are Russian propaganda, absurd Russian propaganda, of course, who knows who these Prop or Not guys are? They do say that they are national security experts. So I guess we can read intelligence agencies who are putting this stuff out, Operation Mockingbird. These guys are now saying that this is absurd Russian propaganda. And Activist Post, they give you an example of absurd Russian propaganda, and yours truly is featured on the website, by name, by article. It has to do with the Russian, the accusations against Russia that Russia bombed a humanitarian aid convoy, and I think the title is Russia accused of bombing aid convoy even when it didn't. And we of course are not Russian propaganda. That's ridiculous. I can't help it if Russia happens to be right, and I'm not going to report something and have it appear to be objective when, quite frankly, the U.S. general says that Russia's responsible even if it didn't bomb the convoy. That's what he said, and we're not going to try to sugarcoat that. America, the U.S. State Department, and their claims are full of shit, and that is clear. And I'm not going, of course, myself personally, I'm not going to report it as if it's not full of shit. I'm going to report it the way it is. And we can see things on the ground, call it absurd Russian propaganda. That's ridiculous. But here's my complaint, prop or not. Hope you guys are listening. You use my article as an example of absurd Russian propaganda. Well, where the hell is my website? I want some love on this website. Come on, give me some links. Put BrandonTurbeville.com on your website. I want some backlinks. Now, come on, give me some professional courtesy here. If I'm such a Russian propagandist, list my website. Now, we'll be contacting you in the future to ask you for this. I want this done. I want to be on the list. Put me on the list. I'm up there with some high company, and if I get on the list, and it frankly is insulting that you don't have me on there. So I want the New York Times talking about BrandonTurbeville.com if the attention span hasn't already passed. And so we're going to get on that soon, I imagine. But thanks for linking to my article regardless. A lot of people got to see that article that wouldn't have otherwise, and perhaps they now know how full of shit the State Department is by reading it, because it's pretty clear. It's got quotes and all those things that your guys tend to leave out, like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that got over 1 million people killed in Iraq. Even if I was lying, nobody died. Your guys got at least 1 million killed. So come to me some other time when you're talking about journalistic integrity. My hands are not covered in blood as yours are. But let's move on. We want to talk about this bill that was passed, the H.R. 6393, Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017, passed by the House on November 30th. It is dealing with a number of intelligence-related issues, one of them being Russian propaganda, or what the U.S. government calls Russian propaganda. We have Section 501. It calls for the government to counter, quote, measures by Russia to exert covert influence carried out in coordination with or at the behest of political leaders or the security services of the Russian Federation, and the role of the Russian Federation has been hidden or not acknowledged publicly, end quote. So the definitions include media manipulation, covert broadcasting, disinformation and forgeries, and funding agents of influence. Now, this doesn't openly call for the banning of the alternative media, but you can easily see how this law, if it's passed by the Senate and signed by the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who has a body count bigger than Bush, could be used against the alternative media. We have, remember, the Washington Post now whining and bitching and saying that the fake news led by Russia helped get Donald Trump elected. I think Hillary Clinton helped get Donald Trump elected. I think social justice warriors helped get Donald Trump elected. I think Black Lives Matter helped get Donald Trump elected. I don't think it was the alternative media, although some of them did, of course, go down that unfortunate rabbit hole. They followed the Pied Piper. You could think of a better piper to follow than this one, but a lot of them tended to follow that one. Of course, some of them, other ones had unfortunately followed Hillary as well. This kind of stuff really takes a lot of cognitive dissonance to do, but regardless, if this bill works its way through the Senate and becomes law, and if it's going to be used to shut down or curtail websites that are erroneously characterized as Russian propaganda, we have to see how it's going to play out. But this is dangerous, right? This idea that the Russians are propagandizing Americans. Now, let me be clear. There are Russian propaganda sites. Russia's not free of that either. There, of course, they have various outlets that are peddling the official story of the Russian media. That's every country has that. It's certainly not to the extent. I mean, we have that also. Voice of America, of course, is American propaganda. It was created to be American propaganda, and it goes all the way back to the 50s, and we could open up a big rabbit hole there and talk about some of the alternative radio stations that came out of that, but that's a story for another time. So this idea that Russia is being so stealthy. They're propagandizing the American people. They're controlling American elections. They're blowing up the same hospital 5 times in Syria. They're attacking humanitarian convoys. They're slaughtering people left and right. They're attacking Ukraine. They're killing gays. They're attacking women. All of this stuff that you hear. It's funny. That's the kind of foolishness that this anti-Russian propaganda that we've always come to associate with the right wing ever since the 1950s, and the red baiters of the McCarthy era goes all the way up to the Bushies, where there's this propaganda over Russia. It's typically been the right wingers. But it's funny, in only a couple of years, it only took a couple of years before the new McCarthys, the neo-McCarthys, the new red baiters are the leftists, the Democrats, and the liberals. And again, I want to be clear that there's a difference between conservatives and Republicans and between liberals and Democrats. I feel much more comfortable being called a liberal or a conservative than a Republican or Democrat, because Republicans and Democrats don't have principles. They have parties. At least liberals, conservatives, whether you agree with them or not, have some type of principles. They're few and far between. The Republicans and Democrats don't care. As long as their team is winning, they'll go to war. They'll crack down on constitutional rights. They'll crack down on civil liberties. They'll stir up tension. They'll let the police kill people. They'll push GMOs. They'll push corporations. They don't care. As long as their team wins, they get to and take part in it and get some kind of vicarious victory through that. They're good with it. But now we have the people on the left becoming the most insane red baiting. I guess people of my generation and younger and even older finally get to see what it was like for the 50s, right? For people to constantly be witch hunting and crying about Russian propaganda. I guess we should go where McCarthy ended up going, which was the State Department. Perhaps we should look into the State Department. Let's see if there's any skeletons in that closet. I think there might be. This is exactly what got McCarthy put off the trail, was that he was fine as long as he was attacking little girls for being members of the Communist Party, but as soon as he started tracing them back to the State Department, that's when everything went downhill, and that's why his name is Mud now. It deserves to be mud, but it's he stumbled upon something real, and I encourage people to go look at the Rees Commission and take a look at all that. Nothing really has changed all that much, except some of the players and some of the presentation. So we have to keep an eye on H.R. 6393. Now, we also have more treachery for the U.S. House, really going forward with quite a bit of tyranny here coming out of the House of Representatives, never known for its intellectual acumen, but they always tend to take the lead with these type of bills. On November 15th, we had U.S. House of Representatives convening a special session with the normal rules of order suspended. They passed H.R. 5732, known as the Syria Civilian Protection Act, the CSCPA. It passed unanimously. They had 40 minutes of alleged debate on the floor. Because the normal rules were suspended, only a few members of Congress were actually present for the vote, and conveniently, those people who were present were all warmongers, so it wasn't a debate. They all just spoke on in favor of the bill. The CSCPA is a bill that toughens the sanctions on Syria and calls for the creation of a no-fly zone. So in terms of the new sanctions, the bill would impose new penalties and sanctions on entities doing business with the Syrian government, with the military and intelligence agencies. And the legislation also requires the president to report to Congress regarding the viability of a no-fly zone over Syria. It allows the Secretary of State to compile and gather evidence for the purpose of prosecuting people who are alleged to have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in Syria. Of course, it's all based on the assumption that the Syrian government has actually committed war crimes in Syria, and of course, obviously, that only the Syrian government has committed them. But let's look at the names here. We have the members who were present, who engaged in the 40 minutes of mockery of debate, were Ed Royce of California, big surprise; Elliot Engel of New York, big surprise; Elenia Ros-Lehtinen from Florida, she's a Republican; Dan Kildee of Michigan; Chris Smith of New Jersey, a Republican; Carlos Curbelo, a Republican of Florida. They all spoke, and they spoke in favor of the bill. So, warmongers, all. The establishment of a no-fly zone, and we've gone over this over and over and over here on this show, that is tantamount to a declaration of war. We even have U.S. General Carter Ham stating that that's exactly what would happen. In fact, let me give you the quote from Carter Ham. He says, "We should make no bones about it. It first entails killing a lot of people and destroying the Syrian air defenses and those people who are manning those systems. And then it entails destroying the Syrian Air Force, preferably on the ground, in the air if necessary. This is a violent combat action that results in lots of casualties and increased risk to our own personnel." Then we also have General Philip Breedlove. He says, "I know it sounds stark, but what I always tell people when they talk to me about a no-fly zone is basically it's to start a war with that country, because you're going to have to go in and kinetically take out the air defense capability." We had Senator Roger Wicker. This guy's a real genius. He asked General Joe Dunford what it would take to impose a no-fly zone on Syria, and he says, the general responded, "Right now, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war against Syria and Russia." That's what he says. It's a direct quote from the general. Should have seen the face of Senator Roger Wicker. There was a freeze, a computer freeze. His entire demeanor was somebody who just went on complete lockdown because of failure to compute. His little pea brain was not able to understand what the general was saying, because he expected a much different answer, obviously. The bill, of course, is named after the infamous Caesar fraud. This is an alleged former Syrian military photographer that was allegedly tasked with documenting the Syrian government's alleged war crimes by the Syrian government. So it's claimed that the Syrian government hired the guy to document the Syrian government's war crimes. That's the discussion that they're having. It's claimed that Caesar had some type of Damascus Road conversion, and then couldn't take the pressures of his job anymore, and became stressed out and came clean to the world and exposed Assad for his crimes. Of course, it came just at the right time to ignite outrage and indignation in the dazed American public, as virtually every other report and incident in Syria has done since 2010. We had this alleged Syrian defector allegedly providing thousands of photos revealing what mainstream propagandists called the smoking gun of Assad's humanitarian crimes. The defector, his name was Caesar. That's what he went by. He spoke in front of a closed-door session of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in July 2014, and the photos, which were supposed to number in the tens of thousands, were analyzed by the FBI at the request of Ambassador-at-Large for War Crimes Stephen J. Rapp. Rapp said in an interview that the photos were, quote, "horrific. Some of them put you in visceral pain. This is some of the strongest evidence we've seen in the area of proof of the commission of mass atrocities," end quote. He apparently wanted to head off any suggestions that the photos might have either been fake or photos of some other atrocity, maybe perhaps committed by the death squads or someone else. And he assured everyone that the FBI assured him that they think it's impossible that the photographs could have been forgeries. He said that the FBI assured him there was no evidence of doctoring, but that's quite a bizarre conclusion to reach, since the investigation wasn't even over when Rapp quoted the FBI stating the photos were real. So you got to wonder if the FBI had determined the veracity of the photographs before even opening the packages they came in. I guess that's how they do things. So we won't go into the details. Basically, it shows people who were starved, beaten, abused, and that sort of thing. The Syrian government denied the photos, said they were fake. Said they believe that many of these pictures are dead terrorists who were killed in battle. That is entirely plausible. It's quite likely to be true, actually. Remember, NATO already attempted to frame Assad for a number of war crimes and atrocities that turned out to be the handiwork of the terrorists that NATO itself supports. The Ghouta chemical weapons attack, the Hula massacre, a number of other atrocities all come to mind. And, of course, we have to mention the Holocaust Museum, and a gross insult to the victims of the Nazis. The Holocaust Museum placed a number of these photographs on display for obvious propaganda purposes. They're trying to dredge up memories of the Holocaust and then paint Assad as the new Hitler. That is despicable, and the Holocaust Museum should be ashamed of itself. Whoever made that decision needs to get the hell out, because that is not the place for it. Now, these comparisons were made the first and second time this cynical display of propaganda was pushed in mainstream media outlets, because the Caesar photos keep coming up. Now, I want to point out, since this bill is there, I want to throw this out so maybe people can grasp onto it and use it to battle this propaganda. Some of the reasons why you should question this Caesar crap. The first, the Gulf state feudal monarchy, Qatar, is the sponsor of one of the main reports and reviews of the photographs. Now, Qatar is also one of the main sponsors of the Syrian invasion, the so-called rebels, and it's played a massively important role in financing and training and arming and directing the terrorists currently being mocked up by the Assad government. The source of the report and the photographs, this is important also. You have to question the nature of the reports and photos, since the sole source of the material comes by virtue of an allegedly defected Syrian military police officer. He was apparently fine with photographing thousands of dead victims for over a year until about 2014, and he had a Damascus Road moral conversion, started taking information from a defected member of government forces. Of course, brings us back to the realm of the activists say school of journalism. This is, of course, a method that's used by Western media outlets to promote the side of the terrorists, and only the side of the terrorists in popular reports. Note that Caesar himself claims that he was in touch with the Syrian opposition, meaning terrorists, right? He was in touch with terrorists that were being funded by the West. Apparently he thought these murderers were a better option than Assad. So if that's the case, that tells us a lot about his allegiances and affiliations, as well as his own moral stance on killing and torture, because he certainly doesn't have a problem with killing and torture. He just has a problem with who is allegedly doing it. Now, of course, we have to bring this up. Caesar is reminiscent of Curveball. Remember the infamous codename Curveball that played a major role in the initiation of previous, still ongoing conflict that was later admitted to be a fabrication in Iraq. So we have to mention that. Now, we also have to look back at the past for historical information here. Assad's crimes against humanity. It's important to remember past experiences with Western charges against Assad for alleged crimes against humanity, all of which have turned out to be committed by the death squads, not the Syrian government. From the Hula massacre, the Ghouta chemical attacks, the Syrian government has been exonerated by all credible evidence. The terrorists, however, have proven themselves guilty because of their own videotapes and their own YouTube accounts, where they post some of the videos of the most horrific acts imaginable. And, of course, innocent people have been killed in the crossfire. We're not denying that. But the Western media has done everything in its power to place the blood of each and every death inside Syria in the hands of the government. So, also, we want to mention the possibility that the death squads themselves, the terrorists themselves, could have killed the victims shown in the photographs, or that the death squads are themselves the victims, or that the photographs contain a mix of the two. The victims shown in the report have, again, clearly been abused and starved. However, before we jump to conclusions about how these people were treated this way, it might be a good idea to look back to the context of the victims. The death squads operating in Syria are no strangers to crimes against humanity, no strangers to murder and torture. In fact, they've been both the initiators of it and overwhelmingly the largest proprietors of it. The fact that the victims were starved does not necessarily mean that they were starved by the government. And in fact, it's important to remember that because of the siege of a number of cities by the military and the terrorists themselves, as well as due to the death squad cruelty and an attempted cordoning off of specific areas, food shortage has been a serious concern in many of these areas for some time. There's also plentiful evidence of death squad groups killing innocent people and shipping their bodies to places where cameras are set up and waiting for the recording of the propaganda piece. The Ghouta chemical attack is just one instance in which we had innocent civilians being captured and killed by the terrorists and then used as stage props for propaganda purposes. So it's also important to remember that the terrorists themselves are adept at keeping prisoners in atrocious conditions. Remember, it was reported that the Syrian military at some point, I think in 2014, was able to free a number of captive Syrian women from the hands of these terrorists who had kept them in captivity in underground tunnels for months for the purposes of using them as sex slaves. Now, the photographs were conveniently released just 2 days before the Geneva II peace conference meeting on Syria the first time. Right? They were conveniently released again the second time as the United States and NATO began considering a buffer zone in Syria. And after the retraction of an invitation to Iran to attend the peace conference, that we had the Qatari-funded report regarding the photographs being released 2 days before the peace conference was scheduled to take place. With evidence being studied and analyzed and a report being compiled, to believe that it was only a coincidence that the information was released 2 days before the conference, that's absurd. If the evidence was real and of such grave importance, why did world leaders only learn of it days before the peace conference? If world leaders knew, why did it take so long for us to hear about it? So as the United States and NATO are now looking at a no-fly zone again, we hear the report and the Caesar report and Caesar himself being recycled completely in the media with the requisite Hitler references during the run-up to the implementation of the no-fly zone. This time it's initiated by Congress, right? So the president ordering the president to move in this direction. The convenient nature of the report for the NATO and GCC agenda and the Israeli agenda to destroy Syria and overthrow Assad is such that it precludes honesty. Now, lastly, I want to bring up the involvement of Color Revolution NGOs. Caesar's entire trip to the United States was organized and facilitated by the Coalition for a Democratic Syria. That's an organization that has very close ties with the National Democratic Institute, the NDI, which is a subsidiary of the National Endowment for Democracy. Both of these groups are notorious Color Revolution operations. We won't go into too much of that, but it's noticeable that the SDC has pictures of Syria with the green, white, and black flag of the terrorists and not the red, white, and black flag of the Syrian government. It has very couched, the NDI has couched mentions of Syria, but you can discern their position on it by reading the website. So taking all these into consideration in conjunction with the convenient timing of the release of the photos and the report, as well as the fact the NGOs and Color Revolution organizations and these shadowy defectors are providing information like this, these reports and photographs, I would suggest should be taken with a very large grain of salt. Now, we've only got about 20 minutes left, maybe even a little less than that. So I want to mention some other things, and then perhaps we can come back to the Syrian situation. It's important, but I want to get some other bits of information out. The deadline to submit comments to the DEA regarding the Kratom ban has now expired. So I suppose you can make comments if you want, but I don't think they're going to be counted. I guess it wouldn't hurt to get them in after the appointed time, but I don't think they're going to be counted simply because the cutoff time was December 1st. So we hope we've got a lot of comments at the DEA website. And this is, of course, just one part of the battle. This is going to be challenged in court, I would imagine. But this plant cannot be allowed to disappear. So you can, I would suggest, reach out to the American Kratom Association. They have really been the leaders in this fight. Susan Ash, Paul Kemp, these are the people who have really been fighting hard to protect your rights to kratom. What's funny to me is that so many people, this was a plant that was virtually unknown to so many people, but when the original ban was set to go into force, so many people saw that and started raising their voices, and then I think a lot of people realized that there were vastly more people who were users of kratom for various reasons than was initially thought. And of course, a lot of people, because of the protest and so forth, and because of the uproar, went out and heard about kratom and tried it for the first time, and they thought it was amazing, and they see what it can be used for. And so we want you to please get in touch with the American Kratom Association. Go to their website, like them on Facebook, follow them on Twitter, and get involved. Ask them how you can help, because this is a battle that needs to be fought. Now, I guess we're going to find out very soon whether or not the DEA is going to put up a fight, whether they're going to just ban it anyway, or whether they're going to let people have freedom of choice. That's not what the DEA is about. Of course, so many people, over 160,000 people signed the We the People petitions, showing you how absolutely useless these dumb petitions are. This is why I don't care about signing We the People petitions. It goes to the White House, right? So they need 100,000 signatures for the White House to address it. And the Kratom petition got about 160,000. And of course, the White House responded, it's not our job. The DEA has its own autonomy and it does its own thing. So what the hell do we need the White House for, right? Maybe that's just causing more harm than good, since we've got all these agencies that can do whatever the hell they want without restraint. And by the way, it's bullshit. The White House can get involved. It can easily, through the executive branch, release an executive order demanding that the DEA back off of kratom. It's easy. All Obama's got to do is write a letter, and it's done. But he's not going to do that because, well, we know why. But this is the power of the executive, right? In fact, the executive could even, I believe, force the DEA to look at other things. It might not be able to outright cut the funding or outright cut the DEA, but it could direct them to redirect their focuses on other things. And we, of course, recommend that be done. We recommend the abolishment of the DEA. It's the Drug Enforcement Agency. This is the 21st century. We don't need this anymore. This is a relic of barbarism. It's time for the DEA and the people who are comfortable with the DEA to fade into the background of history. This is a dark stain on America. It's a dark stain on human civilization. The DEA has to go. No more allowing this agency to exist and to trample on the rights of free human beings. It's got to go. Now, we'll keep you updated on that. I want to recommend that you catch my article, Google Corporate Press Launch Attack on Alternative Media. This is my response to being listed by U.S. News and World Report for being a propaganda website. So I recommend that people go check that out. Now, I also want to go back now to the Syrian crisis, because the White Helmets, we managed to prevent these prevent these terrorist support group members from receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. But they're still here, unfortunately, and we still have to hear about them, and they still have to be talked about. And CNN has been in full panic mode with the resumption of the Syrian government assault on terrorist-held East Aleppo. And this is fake news, by the way. CNN is fake news. It's now having to rehash tired and disproven propaganda against the Syrian government, and claims that, of course, Assad is killing his own people. He's barrel bombing his own people, all that kind of stuff, when he's really bombing terrorists. You have to hand it to CNN at least for consistency. Cutting-edge propaganda, not really CNN's strong suit, because every time it's tried to do that, tried to deliver a big, good propaganda blow, it's just resulted in epic fail. Remember Syria, Danny? They've had a few more. But the propaganda of choice is now the same tired line that every barrel bomb is being dropped on East Aleppo has been dropped intentionally on top of civilians, and it killed them all. Because, well, that part has never been explained, but that's the average CNN reader and listener. That's simple enough. That's good enough. That works for them. Just to know that Assad is the bad guy, and the rebels who are the good guys, right? Assad, who's killing terrorists, is the bad guy, and the rebels who are killing virtually everybody, demanding women be veiled and silent, and adherence to Sharia law under pain of death. Those are the good guys, and they want democracy and freedom. This is it. This is what CNN says. The regime's siege of rebel-held neighborhoods has triggered a humanitarian catastrophe as food, water, and medical supplies run low, end quote. Well, obviously, the humanitarian conditions in East Aleppo have nothing to do with savages and prehistoric bearded freaks running rampant and demanding that their ridiculous interpretation, or should I say Saudi interpretation, of their religion be enforced by the blade of a dull knife. Couldn't be because terrorists had prevented aid from reaching civilians and actively prevented civilians from leaving East Aleppo to flee to the government-held areas. That's breaking. That's amazing, right? Civilians who are being slaughtered by Assad are escaping the democracy-loving, freedom-loving terrorist areas to flee to Assad's areas. Something about that does not add up. Well, that won't be explained on CNN. But the humanitarian condition in terms of food and water, it couldn't be because of the Western sanctions on Syria either, could it? It couldn't be because the United States and its treacherous allies funded a proxy army of extremists to destroy the country. Nope, it's because the Syrian military dared bomb foreign terrorists in East Aleppo. That is interesting logic by CNN. So the CNN articles that you're seeing, they laughably use the notorious terrorist support group known as the White Helmets as the source of relaying all the horrors of the Assad regime. And this has been the typical MO of the corporate press in the West ever since the beginning of the Syrian crisis. I mean, using terrorist organizations to cite claims about the Syrian government. And generally speaking, these terrorists are labeled as activists when a quote is needed, but in the case of the White Helmets, the label of humanitarian organization is tossed around, being much more effective propaganda technique for now. But what's even more deceitful is the fact that the CNN also labels the White Helmets and the Syria Civil Defense as the same organization. It's absolutely untrue. I would refer you to the work of Vanessa Beeley. She writes for 21st Century Wire. She also has her own website, thewallwillfall.org. And she's done an incredible job of exposing the White Helmets. And she has exposed this organization, and she's destroyed their credibility because she just ripped it to shreds and showed what they are. She can personally attest to this too, because she met with members of the real Syria Civil Defense in Syria, and she heard their stories about the terrorism of the White Helmets. And she interviewed a doctor with the Aleppo Medical Association who was responsible for assessing East Aleppo refugees, and he stated clearly that despite being widely popular in the United States, the people in East Aleppo don't know who the White Helmets are. For them, the White Helmets are just another terrorist group. But, of course, none of that matters to CNN because the corporation is nothing but a mouthpiece for the U.S. State Department and Wall Street and international corporations. And, of course, pharmaceutical corporations that market to their aging demographic. It's nothing more than a propaganda site. You want to talk about propaganda? Maybe CNN was one of the fake news sites that Obama was whining and crying and bitching about when he went to Germany. It's always funny when these people go to Germany and then call for a crackdown on free speech. Irony knows no limits, and certainly Obama doesn't either. Now we can go through the difference between the real Syria civil defense and the white helmets, but at this point we're running out of time, and I'd like to refer you to my article, "The Real Syria Civil Defense versus the White Helmets," and it's in depth, and it'll explain all of the nuance. Now, I guess I can bring the India story up in the time that we have left. In 2012, I reported about this. India launched a nationwide program called the Unique Identification Number, the UID, and that was giving every single resident, 1.2 billion people, tying them to the biometric data and using their fingerprints, iris scans, pictures of the face, all 10 digits of the hand to be recorded. Both eyes would be scanned. It would be put on your unique identification number. And the project was directed by the Unique Identification Authority of India, the UIDAI, under the premise of preventing identity theft and social welfare fraud. India's got a rather extensive social welfare and safety net program, and the medical support, heating assistance, other support aimed at helping the poor, allegedly. Fraud is a rampant problem in India, especially in relation to those programs, because largely not because of the people, there's the corrupt politicians and bureaucrats who stuff welfare rolls with fake names and take money for themselves. But although we have this justification for a billion-person database, the increased ability to accurately disperse social welfare benefits is not just the Indian government social welfare programs that have access to and utilize the UID. Even before the program had been completed, we had major banks and state and local governments and other institutions planning to use the UID for identification, verification purposes, and, of course, payment and accessibility. We have Aaron Sins of the Singularity Hub. He wrote, "Yet the UID is going to be used for much more than social welfare programs. The UIDAI is in discussion with many institutions, banks, local state governments, etc., to allow them to use the UID as a means of identity verification. These institutions will pay the UIDAI some fee to cover costs and generate revenue. There seems to be little doubt that once it is established, the UID will become a preferred method, if not the preferred method, of identification in India." And, of course, he wrote later, "Ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised if the UID, with its biometric data, could be used as a means of payment when linked to a bank account or as an access key to homes and cars. Purchase a meal with your fingerprint and unlock your door with a twinkle in your eye. Similar results could be expected in other nations that adopted biometric identification systems." End quote. So, SINS and other proponents of the UID have been diligent in pointing out that the program is just a number. It's not an ID card. But that's debatable, because SANS even admits that the state-issued driver's license identification cards will reference the UID information. Now, recently, India has made even greater strides toward a cashless society, and this time they openly said as much. Prime Minister Modi, this criminal, he has made a decision to ban 500 and 1,000-pound rupee notes, and he said it's part of his goal to move India towards a cashless society. This is despite the economic result of this decision. Because he banned these notes, he's brought commerce to a virtual standstill as a result of this. It's removed nearly 80% of India's currency from circulation. And, of course, he's receiving criticism, but he's refusing to back down. He even said in a public speech, "We can gradually move from a less cash society to a cashless society. I want to tell my small merchant brothers and sisters, this is the chance for you to enter the digital world." He says right now a 100% cashless society is not possible, but he wants to set the wheels in motion to get there eventually. He says, it's correct that a 100% cashless society is not possible, but why don't we make a beginning for a less cash society in India? We can gradually move from a less cash society to a cashless society. Now, 90% of transactions in India are typically made by cash, and that's why this is such a big ordeal right now. But Modi sees this as a threat because the oligarchy sees this as a threat because of the black market and because the ability to control individuals with a digital currency. So if you get out of line, they can cut off your money supply. If you're, there's no way to really get out of the system and off of the grid, should we say? This is a method of great control that's used. And we of course oppose that in India, and we hope that the Indian people will oppose it as well. So with that in mind, I don't think we have time to really get into anything else in depth. I want to refer everyone to my article, A Real New Deal for America, 43 points. And we have a number of individuals in California who have one local office using these points. This is what I was talking about, ladies and gentlemen. This is a victory, small victory, but it's a victory. It shows that we can use these points to get where we're going, and that we just keep hammering on at them. We can get people active. We can pull people out of the system. We can also put our people in the system, and we can attack this in sort of a three-pronged method. So please look at that platform, memorize it. We're going to have a platform coming out for states soon. We're going to have a platform coming out for local governments, particularly small town, rural America, and we're going to have that coming out soon, as well as a plan of attack. It's our demands, it's our platform, and as I said, we just had some people win an election, so we are seeing some momentum picking up in that area in California. But it shouldn't just be California; it should be other places as well. And we encourage all of you to get out and get motivated and to get active while we still have a chance to push these platform points and try to really actually have the opportunity to make a positive change in the world that we're trying to see. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in tonight. This has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.